Welcome to The Common Legend. I'm here with my buddy Doug Pagitt, progressive evangelical pastor, social activist, accomplished author, father, grandfather, and a new tour de force in the music world.
There we go.
I thought you might like that one.
There we go.
This is Doug. Say hello, Doug.
Hello. Such an honor to be part of the legend.
Oh, it's an honor to have you here. Are you kidding me?
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
You are on the TV more than I watch it, I think.
Yeah. My work and professional life makes me available to TV people.
Yeah, available.
That's what I do. Yeah.
You also like to say yes.
Yeah, I do. And we try to make it happen. You
Yeah.
don't. I like to say, if you accidentally end up on television, that's one thing. If you're there on purpose, that's a different thing. So it's more fun to be there on purpose than to be there accidentally.
That's very true. Yeah. Well, no, again, thank you so much for sitting down with me to talk tonight. Uh-huh. You're a legend of the week, and you obviously do have a legendary tale if everyone's trying to get you to tell it.
Yep.
You've done so many things, but let's start with how you doing? How you doing today specifically?
I think I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
It's been I work in politics and was not happy with the outcome of the presidential election. So and I've been off of work for the last 6 weeks, sort of taking a break. And this week I'm back in.
Yeah.
So I feel that, here's the reality of what it means to have the project that we worked hard on for 4 years not come to fruition. And now we have to live in that reality. So there's that. But I did have good family time today with a grandson and my wife, and so it was a pretty good day.
Okay, good day, but like a little bit of whiplash coming back into the grind.
And I was in Cuba 5 days ago.
Oh, wow.
I went to Cuba last Saturday until Wednesday.
And was that for pleasure or business?
It was a friend's birthday sort of thing.
Okay.
And it turns out you can just go to Cuba.
But you don't even need a passport, right?
You have to have a passport, but
you do?
you just buy a plane ticket and pay $50 for a visa, and you're going to Cuba.
Isn't that true of anywhere in the world, though?
Well, Cuba has been restricted.
Oh, that's right.
From 1957 until 2010 or 12 or something.
Is that part of the embargo?
Americans couldn't go, yes.
Okay.
Couldn't travel there other than in certain situations.
Okay.
Then it was open. Then Trump closed it. Biden partially opened it to Americans to be able to go. Jesus. So anyway, it's crazy.
It's great.
Cuba is a wild place. It's been a bit of a whiplash in that sense too.
What was the best thing you ate in Cuba?
Well, it was with the people. The food's okay. It's a repressed country. It's a poor country. There's embargoes that keep good things from happening. It's very hard to get things. So it's not like you're having great food. Mm-hmm. But the whole vibe, the whole scene, living with people, being with people who are living inside of that kind of stress for generations is, you see something of the human spirit. It was really remarkable.
More so than like other places you've been? Because I know you're pretty well traveled.
Yeah, I've traveled to a lot of countries, and never have I been to a place where the struggle and poverty is as obvious as to why it's happening, which is that the United States has embargoes against a country that is 90 miles from Florida in the Northern Hemisphere and is choosing to use the U.S. power to keep that country from flourishing. So that makes it feel different when you're like, oh, this isn't because of a myriad of complex issues. This is a beef that the United States has had with socialism stretching back to the 1950s.
Right. It's like my homeland has a direct effect on this vibe I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? Did you get looked at as an American?
Yeah, very much. But people there have very positive feelings of Americans.
Really?
They want Americans there. Many, many, many of them have family members that live in the United States. You know, like every country you go to, the situation between the governments is different than the situation between the people. That's extremely evident in Cuba. Yeah, unlike anywhere else. So not only did I feel a little bit of like, oh, the country I call home and live in and is my place, but just knowing that there's such a clear reason why it is, and it doesn't have to be that way, adds a level of frustration.
Especially to a social activist like yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Make you lose your mind.
And I can't wait to get in your social advocacy because you've done a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I just want to go back. So where are you from? You live in Minnesota, but where are you from now?
I do. I was born in Minnesota.
Okay.
In Golden Valley.
Okay.
So for people who don't need to know, it's about 4 miles from here.
Okay.
Was home.
North?
Where I grew up. Yeah, I was in Golden Valley.
Okay.
So, if, Highway 55.
Okay,
and
yeah.
Highway 100,
Right.
that little area. And lived here all but 2 years of my life. I lived in Texas for 2 years. I grew up in a family that I didn't know the reasons why our family was the way our family was structured. And so when I was 31, my dad died. And then my mom told me that the reason her and my dad had moved to Minnesota was because my dad was sent to prison in Minnesota. So I didn't know that he had been in prison before I was born. So my dad and his brother and their uncle were all sent to Sandstone Federal Penitentiary here in Minnesota.
Before you were born?
Before I was born.
Okay.
So my mom moved here to be near my dad, who was in prison. Then they stayed in Minnesota.
Okay.
After he was born, or after he was out of prison before I was born.
But you didn't find this out till way later?
Yeah, until after he died.
Wow.
And when you grow up, when you're a felon, in the United States, we tend to punish felons long past their incarceration date.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a real problem.
It's a real problem.
So I grew up in a family that was impacted by how felons are treated, but I didn't know any of that stuff. And like a lot of people, I didn't know how poor we were. Mm-hmm. I didn't know I was on sponsored lunch. Like government
school.
paid for lunch.
Yeah.
I just knew that I couldn't get chocolate milk.
Oh,
and if anybody's on free or reduced lunch, they know this thing. That
I know what you get for your birthday.
The government doesn't let you have chocolate milk.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'd go through the line, and the lunch ladies, would take the chocolate milk off and put the white milk on. And I thought it was just sort of, like they don't want you drinking chocolate milk.
You didn't get a cool lunch lady who just
every once in a while, chocolate milk would slide through.
Yeah.
But I was in college before I realized that. We were on subsidized lunch. Oh. So anyway, I grew up in a family like that.
Mother, father,
parents.
Siblings.
Yep, parents were married.
Okay.
I have a sister.
Okay.
Both of my parents had families before they were with each other, so there's extended siblings.
Okay.
That I didn't grow up with or know much about, only would hear about. But I have a sister, 2 years older, and my parents were together and stayed married until my dad died, and then my mom's now since died. So, I grew up in that kind of family, an apartment complex. My parents didn't buy a house. I didn't know all the reasons till after I knew that my dad was a felon because he couldn't get loans. Felons, more so 30 or 40 years ago, that you couldn't receive a government-backed loan if you had a felony.
Really?
And so I grew up in a family that was pretty socially disconnected. For lots of reasons probably, but they were struggling just to build a life and make a life and all that.
Yeah. So what sparks the curiosity? Did someone just tell you this information you learned later in life about your parents and your situation? Or was it a curiosity that were you like, hey, did something spark it in you?
I grew up in a family with a lot of implicit and explicit no talk rules, like certain things we just don't talk about.
Yeah.
And all that pre-family history didn't get talked about. Like in college, I had to do this project, which a lot of people would have to do, where you go interview your grandparents. And that was incredibly difficult to try to pull off. My grandma had a life that she didn't want to talk about. And so I come from generations of not talking about it.
Yeah. Oh, great.
And so curiosity wasn't encouraged about what went on. It was sort of like the past was the past, you know, little Hakuna Matata sort of thing. And I wasn't particularly curious. My mom really wanted me to know about my dad's history. And so when he died, then she felt comfortable talking about it, telling me about it. So
it was kind of just laid upon you.
Yeah.
Here's your history, a little peek.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, well, that makes some sense,
Right.
you know.
So
And I also want to honor my dad. Like, it's his life, right? In some
Yeah.
ways, he gets to decide what he shares.
Absolutely.
I would have liked him to have said more and have told us a different story of redemption,
Yeah.
rather than just the story of shame, you know.
Right.
But well, you don't get to pick
Yeah.
you don't get to pick the story the other people in your life choose to let you know about.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to live with it.
It's amazing because I feel like our generation, my generation right now, is all about over explaining, over informing people about their situation, whereas my father and grandfather's generations were more like the polar opposite.
Yeah.
Because I came from a similar situation where I didn't know most of my family history, and then you have me now just like out here blabbing about it on the internet. Do you think that it's generational or technological, or what do you think that divide is?
I don't know. I tend not to hold too much to full generational things. I feel like there's a center of behavior that kind of moves a bit here and there. So, but there's always people on either end.
Yeah.
You know, so there's people, younger people now who are extremely private, don't fit the norm, but that bubble maybe moves a little bit. But most of it, I think, is just different people deciding that social currency is built in different ways. So my parents, maybe your parents, grew up in a time when social currency was built by keeping things quiet.
Yeah.
And now social currency can be made by sharing things. Yeah. So they're both doing the same thing, right? Right. They're both just playing the social currency game. And when I think of it that way, it makes it a little easier to say like, oh, we're not that different. I mean, I might share more.
Right.
But that's because that accomplishes the same goal as them not sharing more.
Right.
So we had that in common.
You're both playing the same game, but like, yeah, that's tough because you're very outspoken and for the most part about your experience and stuff. So the difference between your parents, do you think them being reserved like influenced you being more open?
I'm sure it did. You know, maybe some of it being how do you differentiate from your family of origin, you know, and then how do you transcend that and then include that back in? I'm sure there's pieces of that. But I think a lot of it's also just personality.
Totally. Yeah.
And both sort of what's your natural bent and then what has been your experience of that being positively received in your life. And so I'm very comfortable just saying things that I think or sharing things that I do, or, but probably I wonder if people close to me would agree with that though. I wonder if they think, no. You run a lot of stuff pretty close to the vest. So I don't know. It's a little hard to always tell if other people think I'm as open book as I feel like I am, or some people think I am.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, from where I sit, I think you are pretty open book.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple things you keep close to the chest that should be kept.
Yeah.
I think you're pretty open for the most part.
Oh. Well, good. I think that's I take that as a compliment.
Thing. Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Me too.
Yeah, I think some people, wish their lives were a little more private. But anyway, yeah, I'm happy enough with it.
So before your current political endeavor, you were a pastor for most of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what led you to that? Did you have was Christianity, specifically Christianity, prevalent in your childhood, or what brought you to that?
Yeah, I grew up in a non-religious family, so non-religious that we didn't even talk about being non-religious. Like it wasn't a reference point. I like to say I never felt like I was skipping church on Sunday any more than most Christian friends of mine feel that they weren't skipping synagogue on Saturday. Like it's just not, it wasn't a thing I even referenced or ever considered or knew anything about. And I had no religious understanding, no Christian experience at all. I got into Christianity as just before I turned 17, and I didn't know anything about the religion when I got into it. I didn't know Christmas and Easter were related.
Oh, really?
I didn't know anything about the Bible. I mean, I knew that it existed, but that was it. I didn't know anything of any religious practices or expectations or anything.
At all.
Nothing.
That's impressive.
Now, I clearly wasn't paying attention. But when you're not paying attention to something, if it's not a category, it's very easy to not pay attention to it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You don't even...
Just paying attention to something else.
Yeah, I was just doing other things, and I didn't know that any of that was a deal. Like, I had religious friends, Catholic and Jewish friends, but I didn't know what any of that meant, right? I mean, I also had friends of different ethnic backgrounds and from different countries, and I didn't know any of that stuff. And my religious experience, my religious initiation was really profound. It was riddled with all kinds of a sense of meaning and purpose and spiritual alivening as a teenager, and it was really powerful.
And that's when you turned 17?
And very positive, yeah. It was just before I turned 17. It was April, I turned 17 in July. So right in that April to July window.
Yeah. So what happened?
I went to with a friend invited me to go to an event at a church at Easter time called the Passion Play, which tells the story of the last week of Jesus' life. Mm-hmm. Going in, I have no idea of any of it. Don't know a thing. And those plays are designed to sort of tell you the story like you don't know them. The problem is most people who go to those things know all of it already. They're watching the film for the 4th time, 5th time, 100th time, 1,000th. Yeah, and all the surprise is gone, so they try to bicker and argue about the other stuff.
Yeah.
But I was fresh-eyed to the whole thing. And this idea that's in the story of the last week of Jesus' life is this notion of God with humanity and humanity in strife with itself. Now, I will say most people reinterpret the Christian story as strife between humans and God. So you hear the story from religion told that God has some problem with humanity. God's mad, God's not satisfied, humans aren't living up to God's standards, something like this. And somehow that strife between God and humanity has to be solved. But the story in the Bible is not that story. The story in the Bible is God is with humanity and humans are fighting each other, struggling with each other. And the story of God is to try to bring wholeness and healing within that struggling humanity. That is a radically different story than the one that primarily humans are fighting God. So and that's been very important to me because my introduction and my whole orientation around Christianity feels a lot different than what I hear from other people who talk about their version of Christianity as being some version of a mythological God angry with the humans that the gods have made or something, some version of that. And so that thing that I saw on the stage was that story. And Jesus saying, Father, forgive these people who are killing me, for they don't know what they're doing. They know not what they're doing. So here's Jesus, the one walking in the way of God, saying, don't hold it against people what they're doing to me and what we're doing to each other. And then the resurrection happens in the story, which I didn't see coming at all, didn't know any reference to that. And then Jesus goes back, and instead of being full of retribution and power, and I told you so, says we're going to form a new kind of a community where we don't hold against one another the things we could rightly hold against one another. So I was introduced to a story of Jesus which said, here's a better way for humanity to live with itself, with the planet, with God, all that. Not here's a story of how God is no longer mad at humanity. Because frankly, I don't care. If that other story that God's mad at humanity and Jesus somehow becomes the solution to God's problem with humanity. If the divine creator of the universe is mad at what was created, that's not on us.
That doesn't sit right with me either.
Like what that's silly. That's a silly story.
Right.
And basically God needs to get over God's self if that's the story, right? Like grow up. I have a friend who says, if God can't forgive, because a lot of people in Christianity talk about God not forgiving everybody, right? And the enemies of God are going to be slighted by God. And my friend said, well, it sounds like God needs to follow the teachings of Jesus and forgive his enemies, right? And love his enemies. Like, it's just crazy talk.
It's crazy, yeah.
It's crazy talk. So I've spent my time trying to say to the other Christians, like myself, that maybe that story you're living in or telling or thinking isn't the story. That's been a lot of my work. Because that story of some people are on God's side and some people are not is an extremely powerful frame for people who want to have a reason to see their opponents and enemies as something other than humans like them.
You can use it as like dehumanization almost.
If you can either upgrade yourself to downgrade someone else.
It's like superiority.
You almost always do that. And we know that's true because that's what the U.S. military does to train people to be prepared for war, right? They're like, you have to get people to the point where they're not seeing the person as a human being,
right.
or any brutalizing system has to do that. And humans, especially in our Western language set, are very good at using language to categorize people into groups so we can talk about the group as not just being humans. And we do it all the way through. We don't call children people, we call them children.
Right.
We just do all sorts of things. And we use language to do that. So I've watched language and these notions be the most potent combination. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about the language of Christianity, what we say, how we say it, what are the concepts we carry. And so I've written a whole bunch of books and stuff trying to advocate those ideas.
Whole bunch of books, 12 I counted.
Yeah.
12 books so far.
Yeah.
The most recent one being hold on, let me check my notes right here. Outdoing Jesus.
Yeah. It's my favorite.
That's your favorite?
And probably my last. I think I'm done writing books.
You are?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you.
I don't want to do that anymore.
No?
I mean, I can.
Yeah.
And it can sound very pretentious to people who want to be an author and want to get publishing contracts and want that, that someone would be able to do that and could do that and have people asking you to do it and then saying no. So I recognize that can sound a little pretentious, but it's not. I just don't want to. And I don't think my ideas and my thoughts in books are useful.
I'd have to say
not enough people read them
not
to
as
make
effective as the other ways I've seen you work.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do it anymore. And I don't. It's not worth it. Like I wrote a lot of books. I don't know, book a year or something for a dozen years, and because I was like, I think this is part of building an entire capacity, right? It's just things you do if you have certain kinds of professions that you need to have, and writing books was just part and parcel to that.
Just checking boxes.
And then I was like, oh yeah, I don't need to do those anymore. I don't want to do those anymore. So
you're done.
So I think I'm done. Yeah. But I like that book a lot. It basically argues that Jesus' teaching is that humanity is supposed to outdo Jesus, that we should see Jesus not as a miraculous exception, but as a magnificent rule for humanity. And when you shift your thinking of Jesus from some miracle that's exceptional to some kind of path of life that we could all join in and even do better than, well, that's better. And that comes from the teachings of Jesus when he says, those who believe in me will do the works I've been doing, the miraculous signs he's credited with, and do even greater works than these. So like any great teacher, Jesus wants the students to outdo the teacher.
Right.
So
are all these like philosophies and ideologies that you're talking about, is this like kind of what encompasses what is known as generous Christianity? Because I've heard you're an advocate for generous Christianity. So what exactly is that?
Yeah, it's a kind of Christianity that sees itself as part of a whole of humanity, as opposed to the goal for humanity, right? So, like, I think Christianity is particular. It's similar to a lot of other faiths and other religions and other ideologies and all that. It's also unique and particular and peculiar. And it has a certain story with a certain set of characters and a certain set of goals and outcomes and assumptions and attitudes. And those should all be put along with the other religions and philosophies and teachings that also have all that. And so seeing itself as not only being generous for generous Christianity, but being a part of a generous humanity. What kind of Christianity could fit in a world of generosity, of openness and inclusivity at a very deep level? And not every version of any religion can fit in that world. And there's versions of every religion that fit very well together. So sometimes you could create categories of religion, sort of use my hands going vertically, and think about Islam and Judaism and Buddhism and Hinduism, Hinduism and a subset of it being Buddhism and Christianity, and all of these being separate columns. But then you have a crosscut, sort of a horizontal way of laying them out, and you talk about exclusivist fundamentalists, and you talk about open and inclusive versions. And there's open and inclusive Muslims and Hindus and
Sikhs
Buddhists and Sikhs,
yeah.
and there's some who are exclusivists.
Yeah.
And so there's a way to organize the world of religion, not by vertical columns of difference of religion, but by horizontal columns of how much inclusion. And so I see this version of generous spirituality, religion, humanity, and what kind of Christianity would exist in that world, in that horizontal category.
And then the horizontal, what you're envisioning, it's more inclusive of all of the vertical pillars, right? But at whatever level they're at.
Yeah, it's just kind of a different view of the world about what the religion or philosophy is supposed to do. So if you just take like one little word, which is really big in Christianity and pretty big in other religions, the notion of salvation, saved.
Yeah, I've been saved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could, in the English language, you can do a lot with just that word, like saved for. Sometimes we save something for something. I'm going to keep it. Is that what we mean? Or do we mean saved from? Or do we mean saved so that? So are we talking about something being preserved? Are we talking about something being utilized, kept for some future time? Are we talking about something being preserved and kept away? Are we talking about something being protected? Well, if you have a version of salvation which is very generous and inclusive and let's keep it together so we have something to share, that's different, right? So it's approaching each of the concepts with a little bit with a
more open mind.
Yeah, for a different function.
Yeah.
You know, what is it supposed to do? I got into Christianity at the same time I went to college, and when I went to college, I studied anthropology and sociology and linguistics. That set. So I tend to think of myself more as an anthropological theologist than anything else. And because I start my thinking of philosophy and religion starts with humanity. Humanity is the point of human structures.
No.
Right? But a lot of people will say God is the point of religious structures.
Okay,
right?
Yeah.
So it's funny, like I have a master's of divinity. Like,
that's a master's?
Yeah,
You had a master's
an
in
MDiv.
divinity?
Oh, yeah, that's people that go
You're
to
divine?
seminary or something.
Okay.
Yeah, I've just studied it.
Oh, okay. Just a master of
Yeah,
it.
it's like Best in Show. So what I would think a Christian religious person should have is a master's in humanity.
People.
People, not
the
God.
creation of God, or God's creation, not God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you start your Christianity with people, as opposed to starting with God. Now, if a lot of my conservative friends would listen to this, and these would be conservative theologically, religiously, or not, or even in other religions, they would give me grief like crazy. I have Muslim friends that when they hear me talk like this, they're like, oh, the point of human is God. And then I have Muslim friends who are very progressive. They're like, the point of God is to serve, is to preserve humanity.
Yeah.
You know, like, so anyway, that's a different way. So that's why I got into activism, human social structural activism as a religious person, because to me, they could never be separate. The point of a religious identity in Christianity is to think about the impact on and for human beings as they're being human beings with each other. So that's where you have to land. There seems not to be much other point. But I will say, for a lot of people, the first place they need to start in their own being good to humanity is with themselves. I'm not sure of the other animals, but I think human beings are the only animal species that regularly self-harms. And I'm interested in why we self-harm.
That's a big topic right there.
Yeah.
I talked to a guest a couple weeks ago about self-harm, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
I've found, but that's true. Like other species, nothing comes to mind.
I think somewhere a long time ago, I think people said there's some set of them where there's like some suicidal tendencies inside some subspecies, but we've tended to perfect that in our consciousness.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
we're so great. Look at America. Look at how many antidepressants are being prescribed daily.
Just incredible.
It's incredible.
Right. So what are we doing? So in some ways, the start to the function of spirituality, or a place that it should have impact, should include the individual and an individual person's experience with life.
Right.
But it also should then include, how do we live with each other? And
Right.
is there a general spirituality that human beings participate in that exists separate from all of us? I don't know. I tend to come from the side that says, no, it's social structures and systems, and there's no separate spirituality existing in the world.
I come from the other end of the spectrum. I believe there is one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure that my version can't encompass everything without some of that, but I don't know how to include that.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to figure out because so many people like you and others hold that view. You're like, okay, then there's got to be legitimacy there.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it fits. So now I've got a predicament.
Well, I don't know where it fits either.
What do I do with that? And so then spirituality becomes this, like, what do we do with our predicaments?
Right. Isn't that where faith comes into play, though?
Yeah, it could be. I think that could be what we should mean by faith. Depends. Because for a lot of people, they can't separate faith from belief. So I don't know if in the English language faith and belief seem to be so interchangeable, and we tend to think we pick our beliefs, and we tend to think we choose our faith, as opposed to we're bearing with those beliefs, and we're doing the best we can with whatever faith encumbers us.
Yeah.
Which is the way I like to think of it.
Yeah.
And
I like that. Well, you've touched on it a couple of times. Like, the English language is stupid. It's fucking stupid. And we have one word that describes a million things all over the board, you know? Hate and love can mean a million things. I love my dog. I love ketchup. I love my mom. I love my spouse. Those are 4 different kinds of love right there. Same thing with faith and belief. Like, there's so many variations of it.
Yeah.
I like your way of looking at it from more of a humanity perspective, though. I think that's like where we should be focusing.
Well, that's why I stay Christian, by the way. Because Christianity has a theological demand called the incarnation. It's this theological term that talks about Jesus, that in Jesus the fullness of God dwells. Now, one of the big questions in Christianity is is that exclusive to Jesus or not? Okay.
Yeah. I know this one well.
So this is a big question. I argue no. I wouldn't. We should not deny the divinity of anyone, right? So I think what we should argue in the Christian view is you cannot separate divinity and humanity. The Christian story, at least in Jesus for the conservatives, they want full God, full human.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, okay, why don't we get to just apply that to everybody then?
Yeah.
Now we can argue about that and blah, blah, blah.
Forever.
And we do. But that Christianity demands that you at least hold that that's possible for one, and I would say therefore for all.
I agree.
And that's better for me than we're somehow sacks of flesh that have a soul that float around inside of us or something, you know? Mm-hmm. And so for thousands of years, and Western civilization has been built around lots of really weird ideas around what makes a life and a human being a human being. We probably won't get to push the edges of that, but grandchildren, a couple of generations will probably reach some level of sentinel questioning.
You think?
So, like my relationship to the automated voice in my phone and in a speaker in my house, it's a little
about like Siri and Alexa.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a little creepy.
Yeah.
It's a little creepy. And
it's like Jarvis.
What is that? What is that range that, the
Uncanny Valley?
Yeah. The Uncanny Valley. That is right there in our, I mean, we give it a name. We say she. You think she's listening. I mean, it's and it's AI is not yet chopping an onion in my kitchen,
right?
But at some point,
I mean,
and then you start asking a question: if humanity is just consciousness and function, you could start getting close.
Yeah.
But is humanity something additional? Yeah, I don't know. But
are you touching on like simulation theory with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think a lot of that. Well, you have to decide what we're going to talk about in our remaining time here, but because I could talk about this ad nauseum, because a memory itself, a memory that you have, and a simulated gaming or human experience you have mediated by technology. I'm not sure which is more real.
Well, they're both observed experiences. They're only experienced, just that, via visual, audio, waves. We don't know if we're actually living or just experiencing.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Like people who study things like Alzheimer's and dementia and memory loss, they really want to know and are getting really good at knowing, when does an experience move in the brain from a current experience in one part of your brain to a past experience that's a memory
that you then access,
that you then bring back and re-experience. Right. So trauma does a lot of work with this.
Yeah.
And I think it's around 17 seconds or something.
That fast.
So when we started talking here, and we both think about that, that's now back in a memory.
So when you arrived versus right now.
That's
a memory versus reality.
Versus a lived experience. And then I think about it when I got here, and I remember I access an order of a certain set of things, and you access an order of a certain set of things. And now we have memories that don't match, and neither of them are actually accurate, and we can't experience it. Or we could create a simulation. So it's like, which part of your brain is like, which is more real? So we tend to think that memory is accurate. Yeah. So this is real. This is what I think it means, because I think the human experience, we already have a lifetime of narrating and re-simulating by memory and storytelling and photos and books and things that we keep to tell us of our past. Like maybe like you, I look at things all the time like, oh, I totally forgot about that.
yeah.
I forgot I was ever there.
Gosh, right?
I didn't even.
It's like it never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did it? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you have a few things that just keep happening, right? Those things you can't shake.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So anyway, I think a lot about that.
Oh, it's very fascinating. I think along the same lines quite often. And I mean, logically, they say all the smartest people in the world, like the only rational endpoint is it is a simulation. And even within religion, I like to rationalize it by saying it could still be a religious experience through a simulated experience.
Yeah.
You know, they're not separate. Like religion and our experience aren't necessarily separate. I think it's like a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Where there's some overlap. So some people are like, no, you believe we're living in a simulation, or you believe in God, one or the other. And I'm like, well, why can't you believe in God within the simulation?
Yeah.
And why can't God be real within there?
Yeah, I would imagine that most of that struggle is just because we don't have an experiential. We haven't experienced something that gives us a category yet by which that can now make sense.
Right.
I mean, just think about a radio wave or what we're doing right now. I don't know, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago?
Possible. Inconceivable.
Okay, right. So, but it's really happening right now to the degree that anything is really happening.
Yeah.
And the thing that couldn't have been conceived, we're just doing it. We're just doing it all the time. And probably a set of things that was previously daily experience is now gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know where we find ourselves.
Yeah.
And look, certain people could not care less about this stuff. They're
all.
just like, oh my
I don't get why.
Why would you spend your time,
I don't understand that. I was like, why wouldn't you be curious about your actual existence?
Yeah. Did you see the early 2000s version of Battlestar Galactica?
No, I mean an episode here and there, but I was more of a Trekkie, next gen.
It's incredible.
It's good.
If this conversation's interesting,
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially, I think the first episode is like a movie length, a couple of hours long.
Okay.
It really launches it, and then it's, I don't know, maybe a couple of seasons or something, like episodic, not like movies. But the first one, just that one would be, and if that doesn't get you, then don't get in.
I'm gonna take that recommendation. Run with it.
It's pretty great.
So obviously, throughout your life, religion since 16, 17 has been pretty predominant. It's been a big factor in your life, right? And how you've come to sit where you sit right now.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest struggle for you, or the most challenging aspect of balancing your religious journey versus your personal life?
Yeah. Probably that in the United States, and it's probably true in a lot of the developed world, but in the United States specifically, it's extremely hard to have a robust religious experience that's not also commercialized and done in an American way, which is in and of itself going to be some kind of a transactional structure. Mm-hmm. Like how you get trained, or how do you learn things, or where do you go, or if you want to say things to other people, what's the relationship of this to that? And so it's the container in which we have to operate has a set of rules to it. And those rules work against the most sincere expression of all of these things. So that's been a struggle. And then I've been at this since I was 16, and I'm 58. So I have been a different version of myself through all of this. And that makes things hard too, because there's notions, ideas, passions, beliefs that I've held. And it's hard to know if that was a life stage.
Yeah. Or actually part of the journey.
Yeah. Is it any good? Was there actually anything valuable there? Or was it just, the thing you would experience if you were a 42-year-old or a 27-year-old or a 19-year-old, da 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 da. Yeah. So, that's that. And it's just hard. It's just hard to get along. And like, how are you gonna? If you want to do this thing I do that I've done for my life professionally, well, how are you gonna do that? So then you got to figure.
You got to get capitalistic about it.
Yeah, you got to work inside the. There's
go back in the bubble.
There's not a lot of choices.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to like have stuff, which I do, and have a house and a family and do a thing and talk to people and go places and for personal life and for work. So the containers that are available to carry these ideas demand what you can do. We drive around the country a lot because of the work I do, which we'll probably talk about here. But I've driven and ridden my bike across the country. Like, I've been out on roads a long time. It's truly remarkable. Like, we'll see huge portions of windmills going down the road. We'll see houses being moved down the road. And they will be within inches of bridge heights. There's like a standard for how high bridges are on
they're just
certain
barely
roads.
Clearing it.
And they'll create entire structures to carry houses or cars or other trucks. And you're like, this is kind of amazing. They're pulling a house and a windmill and a motorcycle, and all this stuff is flying around. But everything has to then fit inside of that, right? So we're only going to have a certain kind of windmills because of
bridges.
We're going to only have certain kinds of houses.
All the bridges change.
Like all this stuff, right? And you're like, yeah, those are the conditions. And it works well enough until it doesn't.
Right.
And so we have all these structures and systems and bridges that we have to get under. And that means there's certain things that you just can't do.
We almost like box ourselves in as a civilization. Our engineering, our ingenuity creates these constraints that are literally only made by us that we have to function within. And so it limits your like creativity, your expression, and your exploration.
And when you know all those, and this is true across the system.
Yeah.
Right? And when you know all of that has been created by the same MFers that are prone to self-harm, you're like, how do you trust any of this stuff? How do you know that it's not like?
That's a good jump,
right?
I like that connection.
That is where you're like, oh, okay, well,
shit,
it was us.
Yeah, we did it.
Our fingerprints are all over this crime scene.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that we, I wonder about when I think about like, that's what's been hard. And then you layer into it just people and personal, because the work I do is people centric, not only philosophically like humanity, but like I have to do it actually with human beings.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So correct me if I'm wrong, you stepped back from being the active pastor at Solomon's Porch, your church locally here, to pursue Vote Common Good. Yeah, you were one of the founders, and now you're the current acting director.
Yeah, the executive director and founder. Yeah, so I started churches and worked in a church for 20 years, and it felt like it was time to be done in that role. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I was increasing my work with what we do at Vote Common Good, which is to try to get religious people to not support people like Donald Trump. So that's been our goal.
Trying to get Christians not to vote for Trump.
Yeah. Yes.
Essentially, to really just some blanket statement.
Yeah. In a larger context, it's to ask the religious people to make the common good their voting criteria rather than their own self-interest or political identity. And the manifestation of that is voting for Donald Trump is an indicator of where you might find yourself in our view on that.
And you were pretty successful in the first year. Yeah. Because you started in 2018, right?
We did. It worked in 18. It worked in 2020. It worked in 2022. It did not work in 2024.
Yeah.
So
how are you feeling about that loss?
Terrible.
I
mean, both personally grieving, completely dumbstruck as to my understanding of this country, which is on me. So like for some people I hear when they say that kind of statement or that exact statement, they kind of mean, what's wrong with those people? And I mean, why did I think people were different than they are?
Why did I see it wrong?
Yeah.
What bubble was I in?
Yeah. I really thought people were different than that.
Now, it's interesting because obviously then your personal beliefs align with not voting for Donald Trump, similar to mine. Okay. But after a loss like that, like professionally, is there a future for Vote Common Good from here after Trump?
I think so, because the larger issue of helping religious people who don't want to be tied into the Republican system, they often feel they don't have other options. I cannot tell you how many people, thousands of people that I've met and talked to who have said, I don't know who else I could vote for then.
Yeah.
And they are truly stuck.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is not complicated. Just don't vote for him.
Yeah.
But that's much simpler for me to say than for them to do. So there's a lot of work for people who are in that space.
Right.
And then there's a lot of work to help alternative expressions of politics, Democratic Party and other parties, to be good at reaching out to religious voters. Because we're not going to have a functioning democracy the way I think we want if only Republicans cater to religious people in America.
Right.
If the other political parties continue to tell religious people, you're in the wrong building, go somewhere else, we're not going to have a viable democracy, because religion is not chosen by most people.
It's just thrust upon them.
We're just dealing with it.
Yeah, we just got it.
Some of us feel we chose it more than others. I feel like I chose it more than
Right.
others, but that's even iffy. So it's just true. People see the world with religious identity as a piece of it. And in America, it's a lot of people. And we shouldn't only have one political party that connects to those people. So that's probably where our work is. Donald Trump was the symptom,
Yeah.
like the
It's a
tumor
byproduct
Yeah.
of, yeah.
but the
society.
cancer is running through the body politic.
Oh, yeah.
And this tumor is could be malignant and could really cause some serious damage. Or like my friends who are big Trump supporters, and I have lots of them, family members and friends,
Yeah.
they regularly tell me he's not going to do the things he said. And I'm perplexed as to why people vote for someone who's not going to do what he
why
says
would you
he's
vote?
going to do.
Why vote for him?
And then me, as someone who thinks he's the wrong person, believes he's going to do the things he says he's going to do. And how did the world become
Right.
backward that way? So,
Oh, those are questions way above my pay grade.
so I'm intrigued by this, and I wonder if my own ability to self-harm is what keeps me in this work, right? Like, because once you come to this realization that human beings, and therefore each of us, has the ability and probably chooses at times to self-harm, you then have to start asking yourself, is this thing I'm doing a self-harming thing?
Are you being masochistic?
Even though I think it's the opposite
Yeah.
of that, right? So that's a fair question, I think, for
No,
any
that's
of
a
us.
great one. I
So,
like that.
so I have to ask that question in this work that we do.
And touching on this work that you do with your loss, quote unquote,
Yeah. No, it's a loss.
How's it feel having, I know you have one son who was in support of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so how did that feel for you when you knew you were on this huge charge, this huge mission,
Yeah.
trying to change people's minds, and like right below you had your own son, like,
Yeah, having a
Deciding,
son
was that hard, or-
and a father-in-law and
Yeah.
mother-in-law and other family members and friends, very close friends who are Trump supporters. I think it's the great gift, and I wouldn't have been able to do this work if I didn't have people I loved and cared about who were Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Because I needed to always be thinking about everything I said, everything we did as an organization, that we'd be comfortable doing it in full sight of those people that I love and care about. I wanted to be sure I was never speaking of any Trump supporters in ways that wouldn't match how I think about my own family members that I love. But I took on that rule of life a long time ago, that I wouldn't have an opinion I wouldn't allow an opinion to develop in my being, my mind, my heart, indifference to an idea if I didn't know someone who held that idea. Mm-hmm. I mean, I might have a passing glance, like, I don't believe that, but I wouldn't get all particular about it.
Right.
Until there was someone I knew
Yeah.
who held it. Because if you start to form this deep disagreements with beliefs that you know some people hold, and you don't know anyone who holds those, you risk dehumanizing.
Totally.
So it's been a great gift
Yeah.
to have family members and friends. It doesn't make it easy, and it's difficult to talk about. But I'll tell you, we traveled the country a lot in buses, on tours. As I mentioned before, did a cross-country bike ride along the border, rode across the entire country. And I have met a lot of people and been utterly impressed by so many Trump supporters that have cared for us.
Yeah.
It's just been incredible. So, and I try not to do and who would have known there could be a good Trump supporter, right?
There's a couple good ones.
Yeah, there's a couple good ones. I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I just mean it's complicated,
Yeah.
and it is complicated. And I don't hold against people the beliefs that they hold.
Amen.
Because I'm not sure people know why they hold beliefs, and I don't know why they hold their beliefs.
Yeah.
So we do a whole bunch of work of integration and conversation. We work against Christian nationalists, and we just do a lot in our organization.
Yeah.
And one of the things we do is try to help people who are in relationships where there's someone differs with them to ask 3 questions of themselves about the person they're engaging with that they don't understand, which is, what do they believe? And try to inquire from the person, what are their actual beliefs? Because sometimes we assign beliefs to people.
Yeah. Not good.
Secondly, why do you believe that? Like, where did that information come from? And those are 2 really important things. But the key is the question of, what does that belief do for you? How does it function in your life? And when you ask a Trump supporter, not why, or this doesn't make any sense, but what's the function of supporting Trump for you? What does it give you? That we can kind of get to and understand, right? We might not understand how they do the math of making sense of this or that, or where they put their priorities, or these things don't match. But look, none of us match perfectly the things we say and the things we do. And, the hypocrite is just the standard operating procedure of every human I've ever met. So
Me too.
yeah, welcome aboard, everybody.
I love that you touched on that, though, and said it was such a great gift to you to have people so close on the other side of the fence, so to say, because I believe that too. A lot of people, they'll be like, I can't be friends with someone because they support or they believe in so-and-so. And I think that's really at a loss to you and your growth personally.
Yeah.
I think some of my best friends support Trump. I don't, but they're still some of the best people I know.
Yeah.
And that aside, I think it's really important for people who believe different things to still congregate and come together over the things they do believe.
Yeah.
Make us
And I understand that for some people, some topics feel like they're that kind of binary, right? I have Black friends who cannot be friends with people that they believe are white nationalists and white supremacists. They don't feel safe.
Yeah,
there's a big thing.
I can understand that.
There's a whole deal. I know, of people who have personal histories that keep it very difficult for them from ever being thoughtful or caring or friends with someone who's been convicted of certain crimes because of their own experience and certain violations. And so I get it, right? And I don't want to tell anybody that every kind of person you have to make a space for.
Right.
But for all of us, it's better if we're not curating our friendships so precisely when we can. Anytime we can widen. And for me in this particular work, there are 74 million people I could choose from to be friends with who voted for Trump. So, so the boundary, there's a lot, and that's a reality that, I'm not just making sense of the world, but presidential elections, almost always, a couple of exceptions could maybe be argued, but are almost always just a fractional number of people making the difference between elect candidates that win. So we shouldn't say the country now has spoken or this kind of stuff, right? Like, yeah, okay. Yeah. No, not really. No president has ever gotten 50% of or more of all the people in the country. Right. You barely get that number of those who vote. You know, you might get 51 or 52%, even that. And then the Electoral College can change all that. So we don't do presidential elections as all or nothing for the country. We're divided about this, and lots of things go on with how elections turn out and where power. And it's a pretty good thing that we swap this around every 4 years and give people a refresher. So, it really is. You know, we'll live 1,461 days under what I think will be a disastrous administration, and other people will think God's,
we survived
God's
one.
gift
I think
to
we
the
can
world.
do it again.
Yeah, and it will cause real damage to certain people.
It absolutely will.
But I think every presidential administration has effects on people. I tend to believe that in my lifetime, Democrats have done more good than Republicans on the whole. But very dear friends of mine argue precisely the opposite. Yeah. And that's...
Yeah.
So I think politics matters, but I've also always liked it. So there's days where I don't know if I'm in this because I just like politics and I like the thing politics does to me. Or am I doing it because I really think there's something super meaningful going on? I don't know. Does anybody know what our motivations are?
I have no clue.
Yeah, I don't either.
But at that point, Doug, we're coming to the end of our conversation. I just want to ask you two questions to wrap it up. If there's one piece of advice you could pass on to the entire planet, your children, the world before you die, what would be your one piece of advice?
Play a little music if you can. I would encourage. I'm new to learning an instrument, so I still have the mind. I have a mind of the newly converted on that. And I would also say, find a way to be gracious to yourself and see life as welcoming you and caring for you. And whatever is up, the process of life is holding you. And see it as alive, and in whatever way you can. And if you find things that bring you goodness, lean into that. Yeah. And not to be pain avoidant, but truthfully, if you can avoid the things that make you feel shitty, that's a good idea.
That's a bad idea.
I don't know. Because you can't avoid everything that makes you feel shitty. Yeah.
So
if there are some things, and find life in those other places, and don't be surprised that you're not the person. When I used to do a lot of marriages, weddings, and one of the things I would say to couples is, hey, if you think the person you're marrying right now is the only person you could be happily married to, which a lot of people do. That's what gets them to pick that person versus this one.
Twin flames or whatever.
And there's a lot of romance in that, and a lot of sweetness, and we all kind of smirk when you just think about it. But the problem is, in short amount of time, that person's not going to exist anymore, and neither are you. You're going to change. They're going to change. And if that was the only person you could be married to in 10 years, she's going to be different. He's going to be different. Yeah. They're going to be different. And therefore, that's not the person anymore. So you have to figure out how to be an adaptive person who can be satisfied in varieties of experiences. And that's true of yourself. Yeah. Being able to live graciously with yourself at all of your stages is really a helpful goal. Yeah. Because you're not going to stay the person you are now. No. We're always changing, always evolving. Well, that's a great answer. Thank you. Final one. Would you kick a puppy as hard as you could, knowing full well it would probably die to save 100 people's lives? I know, it's a thinker. This is ethics. Got to sign off with a little ethical question.
And would it change your mind if there were 100 people you knew or didn't know?
I am quite sure I would. And I'm quite sure I would be sickened that I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fair.
But I think I would elevate human life-saving over the pain of any one living being. I think I would. I think I would. I'm pretty sure I would, and then I would live with deep regret of that
Well, that's good.
forever.
No one's ever mentioned the regret part. They just either say yes or no.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I like it.
Wow.
Doug, man.
Good for them.
Yeah, seriously.
Lucky people.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Thank
Can I
you.
get
This
a
was
picture
sure
of you
fun.
to throw on the wall legends over
you
here before we
kidding?
call
Yeah.
it? Okay.
That's
so
really fun.
Pose
Yeah.
nice and pretty.
Well, you did a great job. This is really fun.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Doug.